Hey everybody, where do deity concepts come from? You'll hear a lot of people say that they are naive attempts to explain the unknown. They're about death anxiety or they're about control. And while there is some truth to each of these, they don't come close to telling the whole story collectively, much less in isolation. And when we hold up one of these as the essence of deity concepts, we're being misleading, and it's usually because these ideas serve the interests of some rhetorical goal or another associated with our own identity politics. In short, deity concepts arise and persevere as a result of the interactions of one, intuitive cognitive frameworks associated with our hypersensitivity to the presence of mental agents in the world around us. 2, our intuitive teleological outlook. And 3, group dynamics associated with social cohesion and social mores in large societies. Now, I divide these into individual and social/institutional dimensions. And I'll talk about each as I describe one way to put the data together regarding how deity concepts arise and are transmitted. But first, I want to describe 2 important theoretical models that undergird these data. First, our cognition seems to sit on a spectrum that runs from intuitive cognition that is rapid and automatic and outside of our control, and frequently our awareness, all the way to reflective cognition that is slower, more intentional, and based on things like reason and logic and authority. So when I talk about intuitive cognition, I'm talking about subconscious cognitive frameworks that are shared universally or near universally by humans because they have been embedded in our cognitive architecture by human evolution or by the universal experiences of being human, such as our unilateral reliance on other human agents to survive through infancy, or our need to be able to distinguish ourselves from our environment and to detect the presence of agents in the environment around us. So this leads to the second theoretical model, which holds that we do not passively experience the world around us. Our minds mediate and project our experience of the world based not only on structuring the stimuli and input that they receive, but also on anticipating and predicting what's coming next. Dreams are one example of our minds projecting those experiences from memories and expectations. And optical illusions are one way to display the way the mind's expectations don't always align with the stimuli. As an example, this image should look to you like 2 objects of 2 different shades of gray. But if you hold your finger up over the highlighted and shadowed part where the 2 objects meet, you should be able to see that they are the exact same shade of gray. If that doesn't work, you may need to obscure the shadows and the highlights around the other edges. But the reason you see 2 different shades of gray is that the image has been crafted to convince your mind to interpret this as a 3-dimensional object in space. It expects the light source to be coming from above, and therefore the object in the light to be a lighter color than the object in the shadows. Because they're the same shade of gray, your intuitive cognition revises the experience it projects so that you see the top object as a darker gray and the bottom as a lighter gray. This is your mind altering incoming data in order to make it fit its expectations about the world around it. So, let's talk about the individual dimension of deity concepts. The conceptual foundation of deity concepts is our hypersensitivity to the presence of agency in the world around us, and this is rooted deep in our evolutionary past. The ability to detect the presence of agents in their environment was critical to the survival of our evolutionary predecessors. Those who most quickly determined the rustling in the bushes was an agent that might be focused on them more regularly passed on their genes than those who first assumed it was just the wind. Now, because of the comparatively low cost of false positives to false negatives, maybe you get laughed at versus you die, there was no real ceiling to the effect of those selection pressures, leaving modern humans with a hair trigger to agency that can be tripped by a variety of cues. If you've ever seen a scary movie and then had trouble sleeping that night because every time you closed your eyes you got the distinct impression there was something or someone in the room with you, you've had experience with your mind projecting the experience of the presence of an agent. Another common manifestation of the perception of presence has to do with deceased loved ones. After years of being conditioned to the presence of loved ones, our minds become sensitive to the cues of their presence, their face, a smell, a piece of jewelry or clothing. And our minds don't just turn these cues off once that loved one passes away. When those cues appear, the mind can project the experience of their presence. For instance, I have photos of a very good friend of mine who was killed in a car accident about 20 years ago that I may happen to look at every 5 years or so. But each time I do, it floods my mind with memories and with the sense of their presence. Now, imagine early societies tens of thousands of years ago sharing stories around the fire about experiencing the presence of deceased loved ones, or generating and sharing ideas about agents that might be causing certain events in nature. So our teleological outlook is this assumption that things happen for a reason. And so when things that we don't understand happen, we usually look for a cause. And intuitively, an agent is going to be the first place we look. Now, human speech allows us to share these experiences in these stories, which allows them to proliferate and to be elaborated upon. Human imagination is another important key to this, because this is what allows us to construct and communicate about alternative realities, which are realities that are not immediately accessible by our senses right now. So, for instance, the concept of tomorrow is an alternative reality. Stories about where our deceased kin are and what they're doing are alternative realities. Institutions, like nations, like corporations, are alternative realities. They do not exist in the world of our senses. They're just social fictions that we've agreed to share. What our deceased kin are doing in this world of unseen agents that may be creating, changing, or otherwise influencing our world is another alternative reality. And when we combine this feature of human imagination with human speech and with the creation of material media that allow us to exteriorize and materialize these agents in their world, hybrid animal-human creatures, for instance, represent some of our earliest representative art that we've ever found. We get increasingly complex alternative realities that can be externally stored and then incrementally elaborated on as they get transmitted across social groups and down through the generations. So, this brings us to the social and institutional dimension. Once we've created and shared unseen agents like deceased kin or other entities that may be out there influencing our world, and have shared them with others, in order for them to be transmitted and passed down and to persevere, we've got to agree on their nature and background. And this is where social groups and institutions come in. Not all individuals are going to agree on an unseen agent concept, and so it will just vanish once the creator or the primary cheerleader of that particular agent is gone. So to survive, it needs to rise above the individual dimension and become embedded within a broader social framework, like a social institution. So how do we make a concept that may only intuitively resonate with a few members of the social group become attractive to all the members of a social group? Some institution needs to find value in enforcing a particular agent's profile, and the majority of the group needs to find value in adopting that profile. The dynamics that achieve both of these ends the most successfully are those associated with prosociality, which refers to forces that maintain social cohesion as groups grow in size and complexity beyond the prosocial capacities of frameworks like kinship. Kinship is an evolutionarily fundamental relationship that is very intuitive. We naturally tend to treat members of our own kinship network with more trust, even if we don't really know them. There are obviously exceptions to this, but by and large, there is cooperation and trust baked into kinship networks in a way that is not found with other kinds of relationships. If I live in a society that's large and complex enough that my social success will frequently require I engage with someone I have never seen before who is not a member of my kinship network, I need some other framework that's going to make me feel comfortable putting my trust in them and cooperating with them. With large and advanced societies, language can frequently fill that role. For instance, if I live in a larger city or by a larger city where they have a certain accent or speak a certain language, but I happen to engage in some kind of exchange with someone whose accent or language more closely matches my own, I may sense this person is a part of my closer group over and against the more distant and dominant group over there. I may feel more trust intuitively. I may be more willing to cooperate or even to go out of my way to help this stranger because of that framework. If you've ever been traveling in a foreign country and have come across someone whose language or accent tells you they're from your homeland or maybe even your hometown, maybe you've had that experience of intuitively feeling relief or comfort at someone who is situated at a much smaller social distance from the other people there you're more regularly interacting with. I know I have had that experience. Today we have large and complex constellations of different social identities, though. So there may be a lot of different social bases that need to be tagged before we decide we trust someone in a situation like that. Anyway, another framework for increasing cooperation and trust is associated with a relationship with a specific unseen agent. The ones that tend to become the most socially widespread and salient are those that can explain unknown phenomena, can offer protection or aid in times of need or crisis, can provide access to information that helps us make decisions, think prophecy, divination, necromancy, can covertly monitor the social group, and can punish violations of social standards, such as free riding, which refers to enjoying the benefits that social stability offers while violating the standards that achieve or maintain that stability. So these agents tend to need things in return, however, and so social groups must curate interactions and exchanges with those agents. This often takes the shape of ritual and of standards of behavior. And while ritual is often rationalized primarily as this locus of exchange with the agent, rituals provide a benefit back to the social group or the institution in the form of prosociality. Rituals can be prosocial to the degree that they produce a sense of solidarity among members of a group or act as costly signaling or credibility-enhancing displays. These are acts or behaviors that are considered costly in terms of time, money, effort, social standing, or even physical exertion or pain. And so their fulfillment demonstrates to others in the group that the person doing them is willing to incur those costs in order to achieve or maintain standing within the group. They must be dedicated to the group and its values and mores if they're willing to incur those costs. The other behavioral standards that often involve dress, diet, language, or conventionalized social interactions help to curate the relationship with the unseen agent and help the social group to engage in boundary maintenance and to, again, mitigate free riding. The more conspicuous or readily available this signaling, the more it can facilitate trust among members of a social group and tamp down free riding and violations of the group's standards as the group grows in size and complexity. Many cognitive scientists of religion think that the growth of early human societies was facilitated in large part by the pro-social forces offered by unseen agents like large-scale, socially concerned deities. Several debates have been ongoing in this research, however. One is the question of whether deity concepts are an evolutionary adaptation or are what's known as a spandrel or a side effect of a separate evolutionary adaptation. I think the best argument there is the hybrid view that I've followed in this video that sees the production of concepts of unseen agents within the individual dimension as a byproduct of our hypersensitivity to the presence of agents in the world around us, our capacity for imagination and speech and so forth, and sees the spread and perseverance of those concepts within the social and institutional dimension as an outcome of cultural evolution. The deity concepts and their constituent features that become the most widespread and salient tend to be those that maximize the fitness of the social group within its social and material environment. Sometimes this has to do with cooperation, other times it has to do with competition. Let's consider one way this likely contributed to deity concepts that are most widespread today. Three of the most fundamental contributions of deity concepts to pro-sociality are the ability to provide full access to strategic information, the ability to covertly monitor behavior, and the ability to protect, punish, or offer aid in time of need or crisis. So as deity concepts compete, the ones that outperform others in these regards tend to win out. People are constantly asserting their deities are better than the other city-states or nations' deities. Ours is more powerful. That was demonstrated when we defeated you in battle, or when my sick grandmother was healed of her illness. Our deity knows more. That was demonstrated when they instructed us when and what to plant this last season, giving us the best harvest we've ever had. Or when they predicted a fire or an earthquake. Ours monitors more and is more aware of what's going on. That was demonstrated when a suspected thief was convicted in an ordeal by the divine image, or when they warned us of a coup that was being concocted. We see precisely this kind of rhetoric in the Bible, with the constant one-upmanship and rhetoric of incomparability compared to the other gods of the nations. For instance, in Exodus, "Who is like you, O Adonai, among the gods? Who is like you, majestic in holiness, awesome in splendor, doing wonders?" Isaiah 41:23 challenges the gods of the nations, saying, "Make known what is coming after, so that we may know that you are gods. Do good or evil, so that we see and will be terrified together." So after millennia of one-upmanship and then the inclusion of philosophical rationalizing about the ability of our deity to know more, to see more, to do more, we arrive at the ultimate superlatives. Our deity is not just more, they are all. They are omniscient, they are omnipresent, and they are omnipotent. So these features of contemporary monotheistic conceptualizations of deity are superlative takes on precisely those qualities of deity that increased their fitness within social groups millennia ago. Another debate within the cognitive science of religion has to do with the precise cognitive mechanisms involved in the production of these concepts on the individual level. Some cognitive scientists of religion suggest concepts that are minimally counterintuitive tend to stand out more. What minimal counterintuitiveness refers to is a degree of counterintuitiveness that is high enough to make an agent stand out as interesting and different, but not so high as to make it nonsensical or unappealing. I've not really adopted this framework in my own work just because the data can be a little mixed, but I'm keeping my eye on that debate. Another big debate has to do with the relationship of deity concepts to the rapid growth of populations. Did socially concerned deity concepts make that growth possible, or did they develop in the wake of that growth? This debate is also still ongoing, and I'm also just watching from the sidelines. So if you're interested in learning more about this research, there are a number of wonderful books and papers out there on this topic. I'll add some in the comments, but two books in particular that I recommend are Pyysiäinen's 2009 book, Supernatural Agents, and Norenzayan's 2013 book, Big Gods. A number of scholars also published a wonderful discussion in the journal Behavioral and Brain Sciences a few years after Big Gods came out. That is freely available online and goes into quite a bit of detail about these debates. I'll link to that paper in the video description. Hope that's given you something to think about. Hope you all are having a wonderful week, and I will see you around.